About 100 miles north of New York City in Kingston, New York, on February 25, 2014, a train of empty tanker cars derailed shortly after offloading a shipment of crude oil. The New York State Department of Transportation would learn about it from a local newspaper report the following morning.
When I became county executive, you can be a reactive government or you can be a proactive. After the last derailment that they had, and they didn't bother to tell us, you want to dance with the devil? Well, now we're going to prosecute your supervisor who's in charge of calling that number and give them possible jail time.
At night, you hear them boom, boom, boom. I mean, they're moving on there. You can't tell me they're doing 20 miles.
We've moved stuff by rail in this country for hundreds of years, but quantities have probably been smaller. What we've seen with oil is just a massive amount of it coming in the last couple of years, even in the last, say 6 to 8 months.
This accident was not an isolated incident. It's happened before. The same kind of oil, the same kind of train.
There were some sparks, and the car lifted and came to lie on its side in front of me. But I turned around and ran without stopping.
We were taking a nap, and then all of a sudden we heard this big boom.
The fortunate thing is it's happened in between two hills where it's contained.
And we heard this noise. We looked out the window where we're working at Shoemaker's Restaurant, and we saw a giant fireball. The trains were burning.
Meanwhile, in the South Ward neighborhood of the capital of New York, Albany, Ezra Prentice, an affordable housing project, sits right near one of the busiest rail yards in the Northeast. The trains are coming from the Bakken region in North Dakota, where more than 1 million barrels of oil are produced each day. The trains run east through the Midwest and past Syracuse to Albany. To indicate the DOT 111 trains carrying highly flammable Bakken crude oil, each car is marked with a red diamond sign with the number 1267. We decided to head upstate to see the trains up close.
So right now we're trying to find where they went. They're crossing above us now. These shipments contain over 100 cars of this petroleum oil, or crude oil. It's called crude because it's unprocessed, but really it's very similar to gasoline. It's light in weight, it's light in color, it has a very low flash point, which means it can vaporize and ignite at about room temperature.
Ed Griffith Nolan from the Syracuse New-Times shows us how dangerous the extraction of oil is, not only when the oil is being fracked, but also when it's being transported.
Well, depending on what happened, right? Scenario? Well, the worst case scenario is Lac Megantic.
The issue is the people who would have to go in and respond would be going in with this app.
All they have is an app, and when you open it up, it just says, get everybody the hell out of there. And that's really where they're at, The thing is, nobody knows the seriousness of Bakken crude, and the people who we're asking to go toward an incident don't know that it's as volatile as it is.
We followed the trains to the port of Albany, which was once owned by ExxonMobil and purchased by Global Partners in 2007.
Emily, how it feels being so close to this?
Terrifying.
The company processing it, Global Company, first brought oil by rail to Albany around the end of 2011. In 2012, the company doubled its oil handling capacity to 1.8 billion gallons a year, the equivalent of 118,000 barrels a day. We wanted to see what communities living in the shadow of a big boom of fracked oil were doing.
Residents have been complaining about smells from the port for years. And it hasn't been until recently that residents were made aware that there's oil being transported in their backyards.
This playground that we're standing in with trains right behind us Is there things coming from the train, fumes and stuff that could affect them? The toys that they're playing on, and then children, have a tendency to put things in hands in their mouth. So there are lots of questions and lots of concerns and a lot of fear.
An explosion could hit downtown Albany.
If an accident happens, like the accident that happened in Quebec or that happened in Lynchburg, then my community as I know it will cease to exist.
I'm Charlene Benton. I'm the president of the Tenant Association at Ezra Prentice Homes down in South Albany. Beyond belief when you see it's like six tracks over full of trains, and we're being told that they're empty, but we're not guaranteed of that. How do we? What they're saying is that these trains that are sitting for a long period of time here have already been emptied and they're sitting to go out. How do we know that?
Even with so much uncertainty, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation decided it was unnecessary for global partners to study and examine the dangers of moving and processing fracked oil in Albany. In legal terms, it's called negative declaration. Christopher Amato, a staff attorney from the Organization of Earth Justice, represents Ezra Prentice and many others from New York who are trying to stop global.
The answer is not to move people away from this incredibly dangerous activity that's going on in people's backyards.
It's only proper to rescind a negative declaration until we can collect all of the facts.
The government is responding. Stephen DeSantis from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation was out at Ezra Prentice testing how railroads were affecting air quality.
Well, what we're shooting for is a day like today when we have a southeast wind coming across the railroad. We wouldn't want to do it on a day where the winds were coming from the opposite direction and we're measuring the city's contribution. We want to see what the railroads are contributing. We're looking for your typical volatile chemicals that would come from fuel oil, like benzene and ethylbenzene, xylene, things like that, and try to establish a background to what we're experiencing today and if any changes occur over time.
In August, officials from the Department of Environmental Conservation concluded that the air tests revealed no immediate health threats. But this hasn't stopped a broad coalition of environmental organizations from issuing a legal petition banning the transportation and storage of Bakken crude oil in Albany.
I'm Peter Iwanowitz. I'm the Executive Director of Environmental Advocates of New York State. My free time is going to be really consumed with this issue now. The Albany County Executive asked me to chair a committee, an expert panel that's going to be looking at the health and safety issues associated with crude oil movement through our county here in Albany.
From where is the crude oil that's passing through Albany coming from?
Right now it's coming from North Dakota. There's a big oil field that was discovered several years ago, and they're actually using hydrofracking technology to break up shale, yank the oil out of the ground, and they put it into rail cars because it's not part of a port application. It's in the middle part of the country, so they ship it out of that area by rail for the most part. I worry that we're chasing this situation rather than being ahead of it.
On October 22, 2014, another tanker train full of hazardous chemicals derailed about 8 miles south of Albany, and luckily there was no spill. The oil by rail business continues to boom, regardless of the risk it poses to the public. Local leaders in New York and everyday people around the country continue to raise awareness of these mysterious trains. They may be speeding through your town already.